I'm one of the skeptics at this point of these videos that have been going up about pornography addiction. I have to tell you this and confess because I'm not convinced, and it's not for me that I feel like I will admit, okay, I feel as a feminist person who leans in the direction of women that it's questionable, you know, how great this arrangement has actually been for women, you know, and that while our society has been largely through the sexual revolution, it, to say the least, the burdens of child rearing have largely fallen on the opposite sex, whereas men are able to walk away without having equal responsibility for raising the children that they themselves created. And, you know, my life has been scarred by the fact that my niece, who's now my nephew, and has changed genders, and her father and his father, now his father was Shane, and my mom and dad begged her not to marry the guy. He had some real problems, and my sister was just so headstrong, just brutally headstrong, that she did it anyway. She did what she was gonna do. She thought she knew so much better than the rest of us. And the whole arrangement marries Shane, stays with him for like a ton of time, and then eventually, they go and start having marital problems and fights with each other, disagreements over child rearing, a whole host of issues. And Shane basically divorces her and then leaves the country, basically emigrates to China and stops paying child support. You know, my family had to intervene. My sister took out on credit to file an injunction to keep the bastard out of the country until he paid his back supports. And in the meantime, Alexis, you know, grew up her whole life until she turned 18, and then, switched genders basically the moment that she was able to do it. And, you know, um, so that's been a thing, and something that my life has gone through. I have a trans male, in my family at this point, and I'm still kind of adjusting to the reality of things. We don't see each other as often as I see Michelle or talk to my friend Michelle, who switched genders from Michael to Michelle, and I'm kind of getting used to that particular switch. I think it's already kind of set in that it's she, not he anymore. But with my niece, it's just like we don't interact often enough. My family's always been kind of distant from each other. We've been kind of distant from that end of the family. She is my sister, but she got kicked out very, very, very young. You know, she was 18 when they kicked her out the damn door, and it was largely because of the fact that she was such a ordeal to deal with. As a person, that they couldn't take it anymore and made her leave the arrangement and go through college and everything. And so she went she and, she didn't they didn't like exactly kick her out on her ass, but they did force her to basically go to college, and she decided to go in Eastern Oregon and had a full room and board paid for her by, mommy and daddy. And Shane got married to her because, they had this mentality that, he had this mentality that he was attracted to her because he felt that because of the fact that she was there as a trust fund baby, she was like made of money, just completely made of it. And wow, look at all that. And now I'm literally living in a fucking trailer, and trying to raise money to get out of it myself, and everything. And I mean, I have suffered as a result of the fact that women are like literally burdened with all of the child rearing and everything. Despite the fact that I'm male, I'm not one of the people that's really benefiting from the system at hand that's in front of us. And so it's very hard to mentally uncouple and forget that women are stuck with the majority of the child rearing work that has basically come up through the system and through the state. And so like I'm a little bit like on the skeptical side of how this sexual revolution has worked out for the opposite sex. I mean, I'm a little bit, it kind of seems like men are getting most of the benefit here about the whole thing. But when it comes to pornography addiction, I'm starting to have this little open inquiry about it where color me a little bit unconvinced about the whole damn thing. Color me just unable to find myself, in a state of actually buying into this crap, and these lies that are being pushed by things. I mean, I have trouble bringing myself to believe, what's being said in this whole thing, because what we're seeing is self-reported information and in these reports. And every time I come across like studies that have self-reported information, that's like one of the things that I go for in pointing out, because it's like what's going through my head is, yeah, somebody said this, but do we have any corroboration for what they're saying? I mean, do we have any independent like verification of the claim that they're making? Is there any, you know, uh, checks on to make sure that they're not bullshitting? And it comes out in the data that most of the people that are alleging that they have addiction are also religious people who are Christian and have a moral compass as a result that's coming from their church and their religion, that makes them feel addicted to things because they think that they should quit because they're Christian, and it conflicts with their morals as far as being Christian. And it's like, I know about my own consumption patterns, but I don't feel addicted to anything, despite the fact that I haven't quit, because I don't see any fucking reason to. Because it's like, what? So that God can stop being mad at me, a God that I don't even believe exists, that I've got no reason to actually, even suspect exist, and that most of the people who have told me that, they think that he exists and that they think they've got good reasons have had actually shit reasons to suspect it. Because to me, like, look outside your window at all that design is a terrible fucking argument that doesn't support the conclusion even slightly. Like, it does literally nothing and is completely meritless and worthless as proof. It doesn't prove shit. It doesn't even make it even one, even 0.00002, like a Googleplex zeros, 1% more likely that God exists. You know, it makes it pretty much absolutely 0% more likely that God exists. So, and besides which, my argument is that you aren't looking far enough outside your window. The Christians made the claim that there's a loving God. They didn't just say there's a God, they said there's a loving one. Can you find anything that's loving about the predator prey relationship? Where, you ever seen a tiger devour a gazelle? So, tell me something. In watching that, did you feel that a loving God designed that made the lion, and that created, did you feel walk away from that feeling that there was a loving God in a situation where the lion, you know, was in a situation where it was starving before it ate the gazelle, and if it hadn't eaten the gazelle that it just eviscerated, it would also face a painful death through starvation. Do you think that a loving God would create a kill or be killed relationship in nature? Because nature is beautiful, but it's also deadly. You know, we forget that part about it. There are things out there that would love to eat you, or would love to prey upon certain parts of your body and do terrible things to you. If people get bitten by sharks all the goddamn time. I mean, I just, is a loving God does a loving God design shark bites? I mean, Like, does a loving God design the great way, to prey upon us? Would a loving God create us? Considering the apocalypse that we're basically inflicting upon nature on an ongoing basis. I mean, these are all strikes and vendettas against the idea that there's a loving God out there and a God out there that really loves you and wants the best for you. So, I mean, I don't really see the proof for God, and so pornography addiction, it's not a thing. I mean, I don't feel addicted, despite the fact that I maybe one among some of the consumers of the damn thing, and I don't think I'll ever feel addicted because there's no moral there that tells me I shouldn't consume because I'm not a Christian as a result of all these factors. Like, I don't see the proof of a loving God that's out there. I don't really see a loving deity out there. I don't see proof of it out there in nature. I don't think that there's anything that backs it up. And the one thing that I could rely upon is scientific data that, suggested through, any process really that there was a higher power that was responsible for all of this. But, the truth of the matter is that when it comes to scientific data that's out there, all the scientific data out there can be harnessed and abused by literally every religion. If there is something out there like the fine tuning argument, it just doesn't work. And the fatal flaw in the fine tuning argument is just all the religions pointed out. They all point to things like the Goldilocks zone and everything that we found ourselves in out there as far as like interstellar planetary stuff. They all say, well, this is proof of my God, or, like you might as well be coming up there and saying that that's proof of Thor. Like, if it does suggest a higher power, it suggests all the higher powers at once. And so the only way that you're going to solve problems in that regard and decide whose God claim is right and whose God claim is wrong as a result of science is via old-fashioned uh, bloodshed, because that's how we've always solved it. Which basically suggests that those of us that are religious skeptics and atheists should be building bomb shelters because when the rest of the population, by the time they all finish bombing each other, there isn't going to be much planet left. You know, by the time they all finish killing each other over who's right and who's wrong, like it's just going to be one endless circular argument. I would definitely recommend the non-stamp collectors the great debate, because none of these arguments are actually good, in the sense that the fatal flaw in all of them is that they basically lend support to all of the world's religions simultaneously, and they really don't narrow it down at all. So non-stamp collector, his video the great debate really drives that particular point home. It's basically the central point of the goddamn video. You know, he was right, in that regard about all that. But pornography addiction relies upon self-reported information. Nobody's going in, and making these patients prove that they're actually addicted to the stuff. And when their girlfriends start talking about porn creep, it's like you know that, like, as a guy, we're pretty much aware of this, but like, y- you know, all things in moderation, right? Like, if you keep jerking it off, like, constantly and constantly, giving yourself that, like, eventually it tapers off until it's not as powerful anymore. Like, libido has a limited, shelf, so to speak, before it's basically spent, and it becomes a lot more difficult to actually stay, aroused and everything. Like, there's a reason why, like, men are usually satisfied in that regard when they actually have a partner and are usually able to walk away from things like basically happy, and it's a lot more difficult for women to be, satisfied in that department and everything. And it's largely that. I mean, like, our libidos get spent up and then we're done, basically. We've had our oh wow. Yeah, my partner's like text messaging me. I'm like, what's going on here? But yeah, I just, you know, I'm skeptical of it because it's like, if the two of us, we're more like local going on in that arrangement, I would probably reduce at least my consumption so that, I didn't have to deal with the fact that I was basically spent as a result of overdoing it on the computer, jerking off to internet porn. It stops kind of making sense when like real sex is on the table, but it's like when they report porn creep, you can't help but wonder if these guys are just lying to the women and saying, I just can't get it up with real women when in reality what they're doing is whacking off to internet porn so much that they basically spend their libidos up, and then by the time their partners show up, they're like, "Oh yeah, I just can't with real people. I've got this disability that," like one of the most fundamental things and truths about human nature, and it comes up in shows like House, is that people lie. And when they've got reasons to engage in motivated lying, like a situation like that, that's what they're going to do. They're going to basically say, I've got a disability that makes it, impossible for me to actually get it up and everything. That's what they're going to say. They're going to lie to their partners. They're going to try to find any way to bullshit their way out of that experience. And so it's like I'm a little bit skeptical about this whole thing. I think it's all a bunch of bullshit. I'm not convinced of literally any of it, and they're going to have to do a much better job of making their case.